They say betrayal hurts the most when it comes from someone you trust completely. For 12 years, I believed my wife and I had the perfect marriage until she ripped that illusion apart. She didn't just betray me. She turned my life into a nightmare. But here's the kicker. After everything she did, she came crawling back to me, begging for help. What I did next, let's just say it's something she never saw coming. It all started when we were just two young dreamers in love. I ran a successful jewelry business with my brothers, something we built from scratch. It was my pride, my legacy. Meanwhile, she pursued her passion by opening a cozy little cafe, a place where people could sip coffee, read books, and escape reality. On the surface, we were the picture-perfect couple, supporting each other through thick and thin. But then he entered the picture. Ivan, a seemingly innocent cafe patron who was just looking for a better life. My wife spoke about him with a spark in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. At first, I brushed it off. After all, we'd always been secure enough to talk about other people's attractiveness without it meaning anything. But as the days turned into weeks, her stories about Ivan became longer, more detailed, and unsettling. She described him as tall, blonde, and charming with an exotic Serbian accent. He loved Western novels and fantasy, which conveniently matched her interests. She'd laugh about their conversations, saying things like, "It's like talking to a character straight out of a book." But what struck me the most was how she spoke about him, not like a customer, but like some romantic hero she couldn't get enough of. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. And when I finally saw them together, my worst fears came true. Little did she know, I wasn't about to sit back and play the fool. This is the story of how I exposed her lies, took back control, and delivered a reckoning she'll never forget. Stay with me, because what unfolded next is a tale of betrayal, revenge, and redemption that you won't believe. Our story didn't start with chaos. It started with love, trust, and a bond one thought was unbreakable. My wife and I met when we were both in our early 20s. It was one of those whirlwind romances that felt too good to be true, but we didn't care. Within a little over a year, we were married. Sure, people said we were rushing into things, but to us, it felt perfect. I had always been ambitious, and with my brothers, I built a thriving jewelry business from the ground up. It wasn't easy, but it was something we could all be proud of. We worked like a well-oiled machine, each of us playing our part without stepping on the other's toes. Honestly, working with family can be a nightmare for some, but for us, it was a dream. My wife was no less ambitious. She'd always been passionate about books, so she opened a quaint little cafe in one of the more upscale parts of town. It was the kind of place where you could grab a fresh pastry, sip on premium coffee, and get lost in a good book. I supported her dream wholeheartedly, even footing the bill for the rent, which was no small feat in that neighborhood. She was proud of her cafe, and I was proud of her. At first, it seemed like we had everything figured out. Our lives were busy, but we always made time for each other. I would pop by her cafe occasionally to surprise her with lunch, or just to see her smile. She'd call me her rock, her partner in crime. I believed her. I believed in us. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. And for us, that curveball came in the form of Ivan. He wasn't just another customer. He was the catalyst for everything that followed. It started innocently enough. She'd casually mention him during our evening conversations. "Oh, there's this new guy at the cafe," she'd say. "He's got this cool accent and loves books just like me." It sounded harmless. But as time went on, I noticed something shift. Her stories about Ivan weren't just casual mentions anymore. They were vivid, detailed, and enthusiastic. Too enthusiastic. I tried to ignore it. After all, we'd built a life together. I trusted her. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She was talking about him like he was the protagonist of one of her cheesy romance novels. Tall, dashing, mysterious. And the more she talked, the more I felt like I was being written out of the story. Looking back now, I realized that was the moment everything began to unravel. But at the time, I had no idea just how far things would go, or how much I would lose before I finally took control. What started as innocent chatter about a customer soon spiraled into a web of lies, betrayal, and heartbreak. And Ivan was just the beginning. At first, I tried to convince myself that I was overthinking things. Ivan was just another customer, right? My wife's enthusiasm was harmless, just her being her. But as the weeks went by, the cracks in that logic began to show. It wasn't just the way she talked about him anymore. It was the way she acted when she came home after seeing him. And then there were the flowers. One evening, she walked through the door carrying a bouquet of fresh roses. "Look at these," she exclaimed, her face lit up like a child's on Christmas morning. "Ivan brought them for me. He said it's nothing special, just a friendly gesture because he saw how hard I've been working." Her tone was casual, but her smile betrayed something deeper. My heart sank. "Do you really think it's just a friendly gesture?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She brushed off my concern with a laugh. "Oh, come on. He knows I'm married. It's not like that." But I wasn't so sure. From that moment on, the small details started piling up. Late nights at the cafe became more frequent. She started coming home later and later, always with some excuse about work or errands. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, but it was becoming harder to ignore the obvious. Then came the night she returned home glowing. Yes, glowing, with a goofy smile plastered across her face. "You won't believe what happened," she began, practically bouncing with excitement. Apparently, Ivan had walked her home after closing the cafe. They talked about books the entire way, she said. He even asked her out on a date, but she, of course, politely declined and reminded him she was married. "It's like something out of a book," she said, her eyes sparkling as she recounted the moment. That was the breaking point for me. She was romanticizing him, treating their interactions like scenes from one of her novels. It was no longer innocent. It was emotional infidelity, and it was staring me in the face. Still, I tried to be the bigger person. I didn't want to seem insecure or controlling. "Fine," I told myself. "As long as she keeps her boundaries, I can deal with this." But deep down, I knew those boundaries were already crumbling, and I was about to get undeniable proof of just how far they had fallen. 2 days later, she came home almost 2 hours late. She hadn't called, hadn't texted. When I asked where she'd been, her response made my blood boil. "Oh, I was showing Ivan around town," she said as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "We stopped by the museum, grabbed some pizza. He'd never had American pizza before. Can you believe that?" She went on and on about their little outing while I sat there, quietly seething. When she finally finished, I asked her one simple question. "Are you attracted to Ivan?" Her reaction was textbook defensive. "What? Of course not," she snapped. "You're being ridiculous. He's just a friend who doesn't have anyone else here. I'm just trying to help him settle in." That night, I made it clear, you need to stop seeing him outside of the cafe. If he's just a customer, fine. But anything beyond that is crossing a line. She didn't take it well. We argued for hours, her accusing me of being insecure and jealous, me trying to hold my ground without losing my temper. In the end, I thought I'd won. The mentions of Ivan became less frequent, and she seemed to be back to her usual routine. For a while, I even started to believe that things were returning to normal. But normal was a lie. And soon, I would find out just how deep her betrayal went. I thought I'd put an end to it, but what I saw next shattered every illusion I had left about our marriage. I wanted to believe her. I really did. For weeks, I convinced myself that maybe I was just being paranoid, that Ivan was nothing more than a harmless acquaintance. But deep down, my gut told me otherwise. And as they say, the gut never lies. The turning point came one afternoon when I decided to drop by her cafe, unannounced. I was in the area and figured I'd surprise her with lunch like I used to. But when I arrived, she wasn't there. Neither was Ivan. I asked one of her employees where she was, and they stammered something about her stepping out for a bit. My heart sank. As I left the cafe, I spotted them from across the street. There they were, walking side by side, arms interlocked, laughing like old lovers. It felt like a punch to the gut. My fists clenched, and for a moment, I considered storming over and confronting them right then and there. But something held me back. A part of me knew that reacting in the moment wouldn't give me the answers I needed. So, I stayed in my car, watching as they disappeared into the cafe. When she got home that evening, I acted normal. I asked her how her day was, and she rattled off some generic story about customers and book orders, never mentioning Ivan or their little outing. It was in that moment I realized just how much she had been lying to my face. If I wanted the truth, I would have to take matters into my own hands. That night, while she slept, I did something I never thought I'd do. I picked up her phone. My hands were shaking as I unlocked it, but once I was in, the truth spilled out like a flood. There he was, Ivan, in her messaging app. Their conversations were long, detailed, and laced with flirtation. My stomach churned as I read messages that made it painfully clear this wasn't just friendship. One exchange in particular made my blood boil. Ivan, the way the characters in this book remind me of us. Her, yes. The big, mysterious hunk and the artsy girl torn between him and her boyfriend. Ivan and all those steamy scenes, it's just like us. Her, I know. It's so wrong, but that's what makes it so exciting. That wasn't all. As I dug deeper, I found pictures of them together, smiling, arms around each other, in public places I didn't even know she had visited. There was no doubt in my mind anymore. She was having an affair. And worse, she was reveling in it, enjoying the thrill of betraying me while pretending everything was fine. I felt like my entire world had collapsed. The woman I had loved and trusted for over a decade had been living a double life right under my nose. I couldn't stay in the house. I left, wandering the streets aimlessly in the dead of night, trying to process everything. By the time I returned, I knew what I had to do. But I couldn't confront her just yet. Not until I had all my ducks in a row. I needed proof, undeniable evidence that she couldn't wiggle her way out of. I went back to her phone, exported their entire conversation to a text file, and sent it to my own device. I took screenshots of the pictures and even recorded a video of the messages to ensure everything was documented. She had no idea I knew. And that was my greatest weapon. With every lie she told, I could see the truth behind it. And it only made my resolve stronger. This wasn't just about ending the marriage anymore. This was about justice. She had to pay for what she'd done. I had the evidence, but now came the hard part, delivering the blow that would shatter her world as much as she'd shattered mine. With all the evidence in my hands, I knew it was time to act. My marriage was over. I'd accepted that. But I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. She'd played me for a fool, humiliated me, and turned my life upside down. It was my turn to take control. The first step was the divorce. I wasn't going to sit her down for a heart-to-heart or give her the satisfaction of a dramatic confrontation. No, I wanted this to hit her hard, in a way she'd never see coming. So, I worked with my lawyer to prepare everything quietly. Every screenshot, every message, every transaction that tied her betrayal to Ivan, I handed it all over. My lawyer was a shark, and I made sure he had everything he needed to tear her case apart. The day I served her the papers was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. She was at the cafe, surrounded by customers and her staff, when the process server walked in and handed her the envelope. I'd parked across the street, watching from the car. Her face went pale as she opened it and realized what was happening. The look of shock, embarrassment, and panic was worth every sleepless night I'd endured. She didn't call me that day, which suited me just fine. But that night, she came home in tears. She looked like a wreck, eyes swollen, hair disheveled, her voice shaking as she begged me to explain. Was it because of Ivan? She cried. It wasn't what you think. He's just a friend. I almost laughed at her desperation. I saw you with him, I said, keeping my voice cold and detached. You've been lying to me for months. This isn't about one moment. It's about everything. I didn't tell her how much I knew or how I had every piece of evidence lined up. Let her squirm, I thought. At first, she tried to downplay it, claiming nothing physical had ever happened. But when that didn't work, She shifted to insults, calling me insecure, jealous, and controlling. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "You're blowing everything out of proportion." I wasn't fazed. "You can say whatever you want," I told her, "but the papers are filed, and this is happening. You need to leave." She stormed out that night, and I slept better than I had in months. The divorce proceedings were brutal, for her, at least. My lawyer made sure of it. With the evidence of infidelity and proof that she had been using our joint account to fund her little escapades with Ivan, the case was ironclad. Every transaction she made, every gift, every outing, was tied to their conversations. The judge didn't just see her as a cheater. She looked like a gold digger who'd been taking advantage of me. By the end of it, I came out with everything that mattered. The house, the business, my car, all of it stayed with me. She didn't get a cent of alimony either, thanks to her blatant infidelity. The only thing she got to keep was the car I'd bought her, and honestly, I didn't care. Let her drive off in that symbol of her betrayal. It wouldn't take her far. But I wasn't done yet. Ivan had to pay, too. One afternoon, I spotted him walking out of the cafe. I followed him down the street, and when we were alone, I called out his name. He turned around, confused, and that's when I landed a punch square on his jaw. It wasn't much, just one hit, but it felt like justice. He didn't fight back, just stumbled away with blood on his lip. Good. He didn't deserve anything more from me. My revenge was almost complete, but the final blow would leave her with nothing, and me with the satisfaction of knowing she'd regret every decision she'd made. With the divorce finalized and my revenge on Ivan handled, I thought I'd feel complete. And in some ways I did. Watching her crumble under the weight of her actions was satisfying, but it wasn't just about the payback. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my peace of mind. And for the first time in months, I felt free. But life has a funny way of offering one last twist. About a month after everything settled, I got a call from her. She was crying, sobbing actually. Her cafe rent was due, and without my financial support, she couldn't afford it. She begged me to help her, promising she'd change, that she'd learned her lesson. Her desperation almost made me laugh. "Sell the car," I told her flatly before hanging up. That car she clung to so tightly during the divorce? It was her only option now. A few days later, she called again, this time furious. She'd sold the car but was still short on money, and she blamed me for everything. "You're evil," she spat over the phone. "You're the reason I'm struggling." I didn't hold back. "Evil?" I replied. "Evil is lying to someone who loves you, cheating on them, and laughing about it behind their back. You brought this on yourself." She had nothing to say to that, and frankly, I didn't care. I was done with her drama. But I won't lie, it felt good knowing that she was finally facing the consequences of her actions. For years, I'd supported her dreams, her business, her lifestyle. And in return, she betrayed me. Now, she'd have to navigate the mess she created, all on her own. As for Ivan, I doubt he stuck around for long. He got what he wanted out of her, and when the money dried up, so did his interest. I don't know where he is now, and I don't care. They both got what they deserved. Now, it's my turn to move on. Being single again isn't easy, especially after more than a decade of marriage. But it's also a fresh start. I've thrown myself back into my work, spent more time with my family, and even started traveling, something I always wanted to do but never made time for. I've learned a lot through this experience, not just about betrayal, but about resilience. Life doesn't stop when someone hurts you. You pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep moving forward. And the best revenge? It's not about hurting the people who wronged you. It's about thriving in spite of them. So here I am, newly single, financially secure, and finally at peace. Betrayal may have knocked me down, but it didn't break me. And as I look to the future, I know one thing for sure. I'll never let anyone take my happiness away again. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever faced betrayal or heartbreak, just remember, you're stronger than you think. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply living well,